This is Moshe coming to you from Israel in the Galilee on the 8th of August. It's a Tuesday. It's 8:37. The days just roll by, and they're all not very pleasant. They're not that bad, but they're not that pleasant. It's just living in Satan's pit type world. You know, he's still running the world, and the moron is, as I keep telling you, Satan is mentally ill. Like, that's why you see his disciples get mentally ill. He is, and the other ones with him, the other unclean spirits, are mentally ill, and they're don't know what to do. They don't have any real power. Their power is manifested through people more than anything else. And oh, this is delicious. It's cherry, I think. And he's just tormenting us now that they're moving armor, tanks, and stuff up to the border of Lebanon, and Hezbollah in Lebanon has troops in Beirut. That's to control the government, I suppose, and by the border. So it looks like there's a reasonable chance of a war. The last time we had a real war with Lebanon was in 2006. So you're looking at 17 years ago. So some of the older Hezbollah people will probably remember it, but they fought with Netanyahu, who was not interested in annihilating them. He was interested in stopping them and then leaving them around to play again another day. But this is another era. And he's got to, in his coalition, respond to the ultra right-wingers, which are Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Ben Gvir's is just his last name, the Ultima Party. And the ultra-Orthodox are not exactly pro-Palestinian. Let's get that straight, okay? And they're not pro-Hezbollah. They understand Hezbollah could launch missiles into their neighborhoods around Jerusalem and around Tel Aviv and stuff, and they're not particularly pleased about that. So Netanyahu's normal MO would be to have a fight with Gaza or Lebanon and not really demilitarize them, which he could do, leave them around to play again another day, because he's really a curse on Israel. He's not serving the God of Israel, he's serving the other one, the bad one. So that's the bottom line with this derelict, you know, and I would say at this point in time he's mentally ill, in my opinion, and there's articles in the major press appearing about how he lies to this one and that one. So his lying is becoming obvious to the media, and they're publishing it. Not every day, but several days a week. 2, 3, 4 days a week, you read about him lying. So what kind of confidence does a known liar instill in the people? Not much. Okay, let's do our praise and we'll get started. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 So our weather now is just about 80 degrees, but we had 80% humidity a while ago. Now it's going down to 72. When it gets down to about 60, it's not that bad. They were predicting a crazy heat wave on the weekend and stuff. I don't see that now. I prayed about it. So the high today is going to be 94 to 95, which is plenty bad. Believe me, it's bad. And it'll go down to 73. It's so bad out at night with humidity and heat. I don't even like to sit out there very long. I go out because I want fresh air. I don't want to breathe air conditioning all the time. So I go out in the morning and I try to sit outside and do my work for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and 2 hours depending what time I get out there and what's going on. I usually don't want to answer the email from outside. I like doing it in the house, but I get out there and as the temperature rises, it gets uncomfortable, and then I go in the house, and then I go out in the evening, and it's uncomfortable after about an hour and a half. Where I used to sit outside like 4 hours. So we just got to put up with it. It's hard. It's hard. Why am I psychologically having trouble with this? For, well, a number of reasons. One is I'm being punished along with the Israel, you know, that are running around sinning all over the place and stuff like that. And because I live here, of course I'm going to catch the punishments. How can I if I'm living here? I mean, how can I not catch it? I have to. So that's a problem. And I got economic problems, which I wish you would please keep praying for. I know a lot of you do. And I know a lot of you have economic problems too. I know that. I know we all do. Listen, you get the true gospel, you're going to have things happen that are going to keep you humble. God doesn't want you wandering around saying, look how much I know, look how effective I am at spiritual warfare, and you have no problems. Money is fine, your cars are working, the job's great. You're living life like an S-spot. That's how the S-spots live, because God doesn't chasten them. And what happens is you start getting pride. They don't get pride about the true gospel, of course. They get pride about what an accomplished liar they are, and how their witchcraft works, and stuff like this. It doesn't really work well, but they, and they, we run the world, and all this stuff, and we're gonna have eternal life, and we're gods, and it's just, once I saw an interview, I think it was Jim Carrey or somebody was saying he thought Sammy Davis Jr. was crazy. Got in the car with him, and Sammy Davis Jr. started telling him how Satan's as powerful as God. Jim Carrey used to be on talk shows, and he would let out things that most people didn't know he was letting out stuff. But one time he said, well, they say they went to the moon and all that stuff, and people are watching it on TV and they're buying it. So he did stuff like that. I don't know why he did it, and they let him do it. But anyway, he's one of them. So they're generating war movies now. They didn't make war movies for a number of years, the Hollywood people, Why are they making war movies? I mean, they're trying to instill nationalism in the people, and probably trying to get enlistments up, Young kids that, young kids that go to college and get a skill, or go to graduate school and stuff like that, or join a good paying labor union, are not likely to join the military in America. Kids that don't go on to college, that don't get into a good high paying labor union, have some special skill, they don't do good in the work world, and they don't. Yeah, I mean, if they're working in a retail setting or something like that, they're not taking any pride in their work. It's not doing much for them, right? So along comes the military. You get a snazzy uniform, you get to come back to the neighborhood and everybody sees you in your uniform. You get in the military, and once you get past that basic training, it's not that bad, you know. I mean, a lot of people get burned out on it because they realize that a lot of people that are inept and incompetent become military bureaucrats and work in the military. And they become, sergeants and master sergeants and gunny sergeants or whatever, chief petty officers and things like that. And they get to give orders to other people, you know. And these people, they are not really on top of their game or on the ball. Bureaucracy in the military kills lots of people. Israel doesn't run with that type of a military at all. We don't have that. There's very little marching done, and nobody's having to sit up at night and press their uniforms. And Israel's army is not really doing that. Nobody's going to come along and have you bounce a quarter off your bed or make your bed in a really great special tight end. You got to make your bed. You got to clean your barracks up. But it's not. It's not that way. They're not trying to do that. You know, the military is. So the American military, the people get in and they got, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks of basic training, which is really horrible. They're trying to break you down and yank you out of the civilian world as abruptly and as deeply as they possibly can. And your whole world very rapidly evolves around the military. That's your new reality. And it's immersive. And then after your basic training is over, then all of a sudden now you're a warrior and they're nice to you, nicer. And then you go on to more advanced training, you know. You might want to be working with electricity, computers, cooking, construction, mechanic. The military, anything the civilian world can offer you, the military can, with few restrictions. They don't have a stock market in the military. So you're not going to be a stockbroker and an analyst buying and selling bonds and stocks and options and futures. That's out. They don't really run a bank, but they have credit unions, but it's not the same thing. But other than that, they don't do a lot of manufacturing of garments and stuff, right? They usually have that done by civilian contractors, and they don't do a lot of manufacturing. And you'll find other exceptions, but they have hospitals, they have schools, they have police, they have veterinarians that work on military animals. They have, they have purchasing agents. They have all kinds. They have salespeople. They're called recruiters. They have all kinds of things. Okay, so there's a plethora of opportunities open to young people, men and women that are not able to go to college, or they don't have the aptitude or the desire or the wishes or the money or the time or whatever. And they're not going anywhere, and they're going to join the military. So it's bad in the beginning, but then they start going to school, and then after they get schooling, they get a couple of stripes, and they start getting treated better. They become a corporal, and then they become a sergeant, and then higher level sergeants when they enlist again, usually, and then they get re-enlistment bonuses. And lo and behold, what's going on? Well, they're living off base, maybe sharing an apartment, um, maybe staying on base. They buy a car. They're not going to necessarily buy a Corvette, but they'll buy some kind of car. They'll have credit. They'll be able to get a Visa card. They'll be able to finance a car. They'll have they have disposable income, especially after they re-enlist the second time. They start making better money, and maybe they live on the base in the beginning for a few years, and they pocket a lot of money. Why? They're living on the base. What happens? Well, they're eating for free. They, of course, got medical coverage, right? They don't pay utilities. They don't pay water, electric, gas, right? They can run around much of the time on the base and wearing fatigues, so they don't, uniform. They don't have to go spend a lot of money on buying civilian clothes. They have a few outfits, maybe they buy 3 or 4 outfits, a couple of jackets, a few pairs of running shoes, and they have a gym on the base. They don't have to join a health club and pay money. Their gyms are usually as good, if not better, than health clubs. They got basketball, they got swimming pool. All this is free to them, right? And they'll have movie theaters, which is going to be free or very cheap. They'll have to buy a ticket, but it's pretty cheap. And they could buy things in the base store. They got a new clique of friends and people in the same boat as them, and they want to bond together. So it becomes a lifestyle for them, And they're not joining because they're patriots. What happened in World War II after Japan hit Pearl Harbor is American people on the farms, in the factories, in the cities, in universities, working on Wall Street, working in hospitals, working in factories, all started going to the recruitment offices and enlisting. Doctors, dentists, barbers, shoe repair people, tire changers, everybody was going down and enlisting. Okay, they knew, that they had a real problem with Hitler and now the Japanese, and they started enlisting like crazy. Now, these were not motivated. The today enlistments in America are not motivated the same way. Okay? They're not enlisting to fight for their homeland like really they were in World War II. Okay? America was screwed up in the Pacific for 2 years. They didn't have a Navy to work with. And they started doing things that I think were irresponsible, but they were desperate. The leaders of America did not want to see the Japanese and the German soldiers knock on their door and put them in a death camp or execute them. They didn't want to see anything like that. They had no interest in having that happen whatsoever at all costs. So they built ships called tin cans. They had 1/4-inch thick steel. On much of these destroyers, they called tin cans. They put American sailors on there that enlisted to join the Navy. And these guys were saying when they got out of the war and got home, they were going to tell their children to never join the military. That's how mad they were at the Navy. Because these things were loaded with guns, depth charges, and they had anti-aircraft guns, 40 millimeter, I think they called them. They had 50 cals, and they had usually like 8-inch guns, 5-inch guns, stuff like that. They had plenty of artillery on these things, right? And it was full of explosives, depth charges, artillery shells, bullets loaded. And the living conditions were not especially inferior. At that time, they were using hammocks instead of cots, and the Navy would teach them how to sleep on a hammock, and it would swing around, and as the boat shifted, it probably was pretty soothing. I've been on ships in rough seas, and I think it's soothing when the boat rocks around. If you got 30-foot waves, it's not so soothing, but just you got 8, 10, 12-foot white caps, it's fine. So they got into combat, and they realized that these ships that America was churning out wholesale, I think it was taking them about a month to smack these things together. A lot of them were coming out of the San Francisco shipyard. The guy from Kaiser Aluminum had brought a lot of people from the South, the southern states, to Oakland and San Francisco to work in the shipyards. And they were churning these things out. And what it was it was it was like a 80% offensive weapon, maybe 90%, and 10% defensive. It really didn't have defenses. Its defenses were the offense. So you had to get out there and kill the other ships or airplanes or whatever that were trying to attack you, because when they hit your tin can ship, it was a tin can. It didn't hold up. Now, they had ships that did hold up. They had they had some heavy cruisers that held up, where they put armor plate on the sides where torpedoes would likely hit and artillery might hit. And when I'm talking, heavy armor steel plates, you're talking 16, 18 inches thick. Like this. What are you going to get through that with? A torpedo back then probably had 1,000-pound warhead, and what's that going to do to pieces of steel that thick? Burn it? Dent it? The guys on the other side that were inside the ship, on the other side of the armor plate, when the torpedo hit, they could have got thrown against the wall, broke a wrist, sprained an ankle, banged their head. I mean, stuff like that would happen, but there were no holes. Even if it was a 2,000-pound torpedo. So they smacked these ships together, and they were building these tin cans like crazy, and they were wreaking havoc on the enemy. They were the kiss of death for U-boats because they had so much armament, and they'd send a bunch of them out after Japanese boats that were pretty good quality boats. So it took them about 2 years to build up. And while they were in the process of building up, they were losing islands in the Pacific. Soldiers were getting captured by the Japanese and tortured and tormented. It was horrible what they did to them. The Nazis would capture American soldiers, and they treated them with much more respect, much more, than the Japanese. The Japanese mentality was, why did you surrender? Just kill yourself. This is dishonorable. So they treated them like vermin. They were really nasty to them, With the Germans, a German soldier would surrender, and they didn't think anything was that unusual about it. You surround, Germans, if they surrounded a position, they had 100 or 200 guys, they said, well, there's 1,800 soldiers around you. We're going to pour the artillery and the mortars in. You got 5 minutes to surrender, or we're going to annihilate you. You don't want to die, do you? And they'd surrender, and the Nazis would, give them medical, feed them water, Yeah, it's what they did, They didn't want their soldiers abused, but the Japanese mentality was that their soldiers should not surrender. And so they were not worried about that, so they tormented the American and the British and the Australian GIs and stuff like that. So now the Israeli army is a patriot thing. It's not like the American army. The American army is full of these young people that want to get out of an economic dilemma. And if you're in the military, you will not go hungry. I mean, up to date, till now, you wouldn't go hungry, you wouldn't go without medical, you wouldn't go without a roof over your head. And the chances of getting killed in a war are not that high. The last big fight America had was around 1991, 92 with Saddam Hussein. Now, I knew guys that fought in that, and what happened there was the Americans were telling their soldiers, "Don't worry, we got this one. It's going to be an easy fight." And from the soldiers that were there, it was not an easy fight. His royal guards, or whatever he called his elite troops, were well trained, not as well equipped as the Americans, but equipped well enough, and they fought hard. And guys were getting killed. But that's a long time ago. That's what, about 30 years ago. So these kids don't know from that, young people, right? So to them, it's not that likely that there's going to be a war. They know that special forces guys get into fights, but, they're not really they not heavily at war. A lot of them are stationed all around the world, and they, never were in combat and stuff like that. And then there's branches of the service they go in where it's less likely to be affected, like the Air Force and the Navy. The Air Force and the Navy were not heavily affected in Iraq. Okay? The Army, the Marines get into it. The Coast Guard, if there's a war, if you don't know this, the Coast Guard submits itself to the Navy and becomes part of the Navy. So like in Vietnam, Coast Guard were fighting with boats in the rivers and waters of Vietnam. So if there's a fight in the Persian Gulf, the Coast Guard could be in the Persian Gulf or the Sea of Oman in combat. But if there's not a real war going on, the Coast Guard stays around America, and they're doing other things. They're doing rescues, and they do actually seriously go into the rescue business. They're in the rescue business big time, and they rescue people. And they also go after, now who are they rescuing? Well, they're normally not rescuing poor people that live in the ghetto, because they rarely go out on their yacht and get into trouble. They rarely go out on their fishing boat, on their sailboat, and get into trouble. They don't even have a fishing boat. What are they going to do? Get into trouble at a free public beach? That's lifeguard time, not the Coast Guard. So it's for the more elite people. But anyway, they do rescue people. And they do a lot of drug interdiction and illegal aliens sneaking in interdiction, and fishing violations and things like that. It's more or less a rescue agency and a regulatory agency. But back to the Israeli military. Well, there's a draft, and the kids, when they get out of high school, are required to enlist. Now, they can go in the Air Force if the Air Force takes them. They could go into the Navy if the Navy takes them. And they could go into the Army if the Army takes them. Okay? I think they could also go into the Border Police. I'd have to check that. I'm not entirely sure anymore. But there's no Marine Corps here, and there's no Coast Guard. So there's no 5 branches of the service. There's a Navy, there's an Air Force, and an Army. Okay? Now, if they can't get in the Air Force or the Navy, the Army's going to take them for sure. unless there's some physical or emotional, mental disability in place. Okay, so they got to go in. What is it? 3 years. The women go in for 2 years, and people that come to Israel from other countries at an older age, if you're 40, forget it. They're not taking you. Okay, it's over. You hit 40 years old, you come here, you have no military service, nothing. Okay. If you're you come here and you're 29 years old and you're a male and you got a wife and 3 kids, the chances of them taking you are low. You'd have to report and see what they do. If they did take you, you would probably go in for maybe 2-3 months, basically basic training and a little bit extra, if that. And then you would be put in a reserve unit in maybe 2 weeks a year. Maybe not. Maybe you'd be put in a reserve unit and they never call you. Or there's a high probability that they just leave you alone. Now, if you came here and you were 25 years old, not 18 or 19, and you had no kids and no family, they might not put you in the whole 3 years. They might put you in for 2 or a year and a half and then reserves. But they're going to put you in, okay? If you're a woman and you, let's say, you come here and you got kids and stuff, they're not going to bother you. They're going to leave you alone. If you're a woman and you come, I think, over 26, they're going to leave you alone. They're not going to bother you. If you come here and you're a 22-year-old woman, they'd probably put you in for 2 years. Okay, now if you come here and you're 28 years old and you were in the military in your own country, let's say you were in the military in America for 3 years and then you made Aliyah Israel and you were already in an army for 3 years, they probably would take you, but they might take you just for a year. They'd reduce it because they take that into account if you were in another army in another country. So they'd probably reduce your time, and then you'd have reserve duty potentially till you're 40 years old. Potentially. Now, they could stop taking you in. I worked with a guy that was a pilot. He was a bomber pilot, and this is many years ago, and he was, I guess, around 40. Well, back then the age was higher. I think it was 45 or something like that. He was around that age, and his commander called him up one day and said, "What do you want to do?" You know, they didn't have him flying missions anymore. He was too old. His reflexes and stuff, ability to take G-forces, you know, that stuff they don't want. They want a 20-year-old, 28-year-old, you know, they don't want a guy 44. So they said, "Do you want to keep doing reserve duty or you'd rather not?" Because he was teaching the younger pilots how to fly, and he said, "No, I don't like it, I'd rather not." And he said, "Okay, I won't call you anymore." That's how they did it, okay? Because he wasn't very vital to the government. He'd go up in a 2-seat jet and he would coach the new pilot about how to land and take off and do things, you know, how to fight and whatever, right? So they didn't call him anymore, you know. So they're not necessarily that excited about calling older people. Older people don't fight well, they weigh the risk. They're looking for young, gung-ho kids. But the people here are not going in there because they need an opportunity to make a living. You don't get any pay worth a hoot. You get enough pay maybe to pay bus fare to go home and visit your family. They don't pay them anything, not like America. I mean, in America, once you got out of basic training and you were you'd probably, I don't know, what would you be making, 1,600 a month, 1,800 a month, or something like that. It's not, in Israel, you'd probably make $150 a month. Okay? Nothing. Nothing. So the parents help them out. And if you come over here and you're one of those people that comes from another country to join the IDF and fight for the IDF, and then you just go home to your other country, like a lonesome soldier, a soldier without family here. There's organizations that help them. They have them over to their house for Shabbat. They let them sleep there. They'll give them stuff. Okay, when soldiers go in, they need things. They need big backpacks. They need coats, jackets. Parents got to buy that stuff. Okay. So they need pocket money and stuff like that. And since Israel is a small country, and they get time off for Shabbat, it's not difficult for them to jump on a bus and go home and see their family and then get back to the base. I mean, it could run into 4, 5, 6 hour trip, but it could also run into a 2-hour trip, which is not that oppressive. So they could get off on Friday and come back by Sunday morning. It's not a big deal. They're normally not taking cars on the bases. The lifers, the ones that are really in the military for real, do. Now the military here pays the officers well. The officers have a nice living wage and I guess benefits, okay? The enlisted people, the sergeants and stuff like that, they don't get that well paid. But a lot of women go in the military and stay in the military and they wait to retire. You'd be surprised how many. They're not necessarily doing combat, they're doing other things. And I don't know what they make, I never researched it, but it's probably a living wage or they wouldn't be doing it, So you're probably in the first 3 years, you don't make anything, and then if you re-enlist, they probably pay you something, but it's not overwhelming, So they're in it for nationalism. They're in it to be patriots. That's why they're there. If you don't want to go into the military in Israel, it's not that difficult to get out of it. They go to doctors that are sympathetic and they get allergy things, skin problem things, joints and bone things, psychology, neurotic, stuff like that. And quite a few people do it and get out. Where it was 35 years ago, literally, kids would apply. You got to enlist is the way it's. In America, you get drafted. During the Vietnam War, you were lined up and they went down the road and they said, 1, 2, 3, you're a Marine, 1, 2, 3, you're a Marine. And they were drafting into the Marines, which during Vietnam was a good way to get killed. And it was a very gung-ho unit. And I think it was silly to draft people into that because they didn't want it. And I know people that got drafted into it, and I remember one guy telling me during Vietnam how crazy it was. He says, we had these knives that you could put on the rifle, we'd practice with the dummy of the fighting with the knife, like a bayonet fighting. It was a bayonet, but also was a combat knife and a utility knife. And they called them K-bars and others. They had other kinds, of many different kinds. And they usually had a 7 or 8 inch blade, and they'd kill you. And he said we had these knives, and he said they were so dull you could go like this and hit, wouldn't cut the skin, They were afraid they'd kill each other, And he said they made us crazy, It was just crazy. And all it was about was turning you into a killer. And then after you finished basic, that was just the beginning of it. Now, in the Marines, everybody's a killer. The cook, the mechanic, okay. So even if you went on to become a mechanic or work with the telephone system or work with the radios or work on the airplanes or whatever, you were always never to forget you were a killer for the Marines. That was, so they had it a lot worse than the Army, you know. If you just want to go in the military in America and have an easy life and make rank and get good money, the Army's usually the way to do it because it's the biggest one, it has the biggest budget, and they do many things. They have combat arms and combat divisions, and they got many, 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 many people that are not really combat, and they don't get into all this gung-ho craziness with them, you know. There's so many different jobs you could get in the Army that are gonna not, get you to the battlefield right away. But if the eggs are starting to hit the fan, you're gonna grab your gun, I spoke to guys in Vietnam. I remember one guy told me he was a cook. And he didn't work as a cook when he got out, which is unusual. A lot of people get trained as a cook in the military, and there's a lot of jobs you could get when you get out because you know how to cook for a large volume of people, institutional food, in other words, crap food. And you're in demand, but he worked in this hat company that I had a summer job in because of a friend of my mother's. Her brother owned it and needed a summer job, and it wasn't a cowboy hat company. They made women's hats. It's in the '60s. It was really a nice place to work. It was hot in the summer. I had to take a subway and a bus or two to get there, but they were all Puerto Ricans that worked there. And they were nice guys. I used to kid around with them, and I used to really enjoy learning how they lived in their culture. Them or their family came from Puerto Rico, and they lived in ghettos in New York. And what really impressed me upon them, yeah, they were ungodly, of course. Or they thought they were because a lot of them were Catholic, but that didn't mean anything. But what impressed me upon them is they knew how to have fun. The guy that was the manager of the crew, and what we were doing was packing and repacking hats and shipping them and pulling orders, and it was bending down, moving things, and it was summertime and it could be hot, and there was no air conditioning, but we weren't out in the sun, we were inside, and it was a big water cooler, and I was young, it didn't bother me. And I came home one day on the subway, I ran into one of my friends, and I was wearing the junky clothes, to work in the warehouse because it was dirty. And he looks at me, starts laughing. He says, what's going on with you? What happened? I said, I'm coming home from work. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm working in a warehouse with hats. He started laughing, he was a pretty nice guy. He just, his father was a warden in one of the jails, so that means expire. And then when he got out of college, he got a very high-paying job with Sony. So it was Espy World, but I didn't know from that back then. So anyway, he was, to me, always a nice guy. I had no issues with this guy, So they knew how to have fun. They'd go out at night, and they'd go to the beach, they'd go to the park, they would drink their beer, listen to this radio, the Spanish stations. The girls all liked to have fun, so they were hooked up, they get married, they had kids. They lived in these ghetto apartments with each other, and it was cheap living. And this is in the '60s, so you didn't really have the bad drugs that much. You had them, but it wasn't so bad. So it was still okay living there. They had a good time. They were not godly, don't get me wrong, but they made the best of things, and they, in those days they were just barely, maybe not even then, starting to take these people from the ghettos and push them through the universities and get them into degrees and, support them and pay for their university. They'd send them to the city of New York universities and then try to put them out in the workforce. And not that many wanted to do it, not that many finished it. But, they didn't really push it much. I'm not even sure they were doing it back then. And it was interesting. So the Israeli soldier is fighting for Israel. The American soldier is in the army to get himself out of not a great situation. How many rich kids, how many kids, their fathers live in Ardsley on the Hudson and have an 18,000, square foot house on 6 acres with a riding stable, go in the military? It's freaking rare. Okay? It's rare. And the ones that do that, they're going to go to West Point and Annapolis, and they're going to have all the connections, and they're going to get fast tracked. They're going to have to, they're going to have to cut the mustard at these military academies, but then they're going to get stationed in the right place and have the right duty and all the right opportunities and the promotions, and they're going to be pushed upstairs. So they're very quickly going to be like, captains or commanders in the Navy, and then they're going to be like majors, and then they're going to be colonels, and they're going to have a real chance at becoming a general. A colonel is a pretty good existence in the American military, but it's nothing like being a general. Nothing. But it's a pretty good existence because there's not that many people that are going to bother you. Not many. You're way up there, And when they retire out, a full colonel retirement is probably pushing $5,000 a month today. So a lot of them retire out and then they get a job in the private sector, and they could make at least more than that, So they live, they don't keep them in very long. They go in. When you enlist in Annapolis or the West Point and those things, you're really, I think, in the military while you're going there. It's considered being in the military. So they go in at 18 years old. So if they make it till they're 43, they did well. Not very many get 25 years in the service. Usually they're out at 20. And usually the last 2 years or so, or 3 years, they don't give them much of anything to do. Although some might have something to do. So they, if they can make it for 25 years, they did well. The military really needs to need you to give you the 25-year run. And then if they really need you, like maybe you're medical or something with computers, and you may make 30 years. So if you made 30 years, you're 48. You're not old. You could still have a good run in the private sector, no problem. So, a friend of mine married a woman that was a retired colonel from one of the branches of the service. She was a lawyer, so she was operating as a lawyer, and she got out and she got her full pension, and then she worked as a legal advisor to some mucky muck in the military, probably a general or something like that, making a very high rate of pay. Because for that kind of job, they got to have a retired military lawyer. They don't got it, but a military lawyer like that's going to know what they're doing in the military. Whereas if they hired some kid out of law school, they're going to be basically useless to the general. So now we're up in Lebanon. There's pictures of many tanks being shifted up to Lebanon, I would say, in the last 36 hours or so. Are we going to have a fight with Lebanon? My thinking is if we do, it's going to be a preemptive strike. Now, as far as I know, that tent they set up inside Israel territory near Lebanon like a few yards away, where Lebanon is saying it's their territory, and Israel keeps saying they're going to remove it, and they haven't removed it. They might be ready to remove the tent, and they're afraid for blowback or repercussions from Lebanon or Hezbollah, really. The Lebanese military is not going to do much to Israel. If we attack Hezbollah and we're attacking Lebanon, they might get into the fight, but I don't expect much resistance. See, the people in Hezbollah, they don't have their heads screwed on right, okay? We're going to fight with airplanes that are advanced airplanes. Our planes are advanced to the UK and the US and China and Russia level. Hezbollah got no air force. What are they going to do? You see, they got a terrorist approach where they're going to launch. There's 100,000 of them in Hezbollah, that's it, okay? And the lion's share of those guys are really good with the AK-47 maybe, or an RPG. That's it. What are they? They don't have any sophistication in terms of weapons. Okay? And what are they going to do against our tanks, our mobile artillery, our armored personnel carriers, our aircraft with rifles? What are they going to do? Shoot the rifle up at the plane like the farmer in Vietnam with a bolt-action rifle from World War One, and every few months a plane would get hit, or maybe not, maybe more than that. I knew a guy that was flying in Vietnam, and he got hit, and he lost his plane. He ejected, and then what they did as punishment to set an example for the other pilots, they put him in basically a Piper Cub to fly reconnaissance. And the Piper Cub had no armored chair. The fighter jets had, a chair which had a back, a headrest, and maybe some sides, And that chair was bulletproof. They had panels in there that was probably metal or something, would stop bullets. So these guys shooting with, rifles and things like that, it would be rather difficult for them to hit you in the jet. I mean, unless you were flying inverted like Tom Cruise in Top Gun, which is for the movies, you're not flying inverted. So the bullet's coming from below. If it gets right where you are, it'll hit the chair. Could it possibly hit your leg? I don't know. But the guys lost aircraft. There was ground-to-air missiles. They had their SAMs, they called them, first generation and stuff, second generation, and they were taking planes out. Not often, but it happened. And so he got put into a Piper Cub thing, and he had nothing. He used to get a flak jacket and sit on that, put that underneath, and that wouldn't help with a bullet usually. It might, because the plane would be high up and the bullet didn't have a lot of speed. So if he was, 3,000 feet up or 2,000 or something like that, and you're shooting up with a bullet, it's going to lose a lot of velocity by the time it gets up there. So the flak jacket might do some good. It might also help with flak. But well, he survived. I knew the guy after he got out of there. And the way they treated pilots wasn't really great. He told me they used to drink all the time because it was so bad. And they had to run missions and operations continually. He said they sometimes would call you out when you were drunk. And he said he got in the plane and you'd sit there for maybe 10 minutes breathing oxygen from the mask, futzing with the controls and stuff before you take off. And he said that would sober you up pretty good. And then he said when he had downtime, he wasn't working on, flying. He used to sit there with the shortwave radio and just, half asleep and put the radio by his ear and listen to the ball games from America. Just didn't like being there. I'll be right back. It was not a great war. People weren't motivated. The Vietnamese people were motivated, but the Americans weren't. So, what's the purpose of all this talk about the military? Basically, the Israeli army is highly motivated. And when they fight Lebanon, they're fighting for their homeland. The American military, when it goes overseas far away, they're not fighting for their homeland, and they know it. And they also know, well, they don't know why they're even fighting there. So now the Fifth Fleet, which is an aircraft carrier with probably, I'm going to guess, 5 or 6 escort vessels, is banging around in the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. I guess they're moving it around. The idea is to protect the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf. Now, Iran is saying, well, we're here to protect the Persian Gulf. Well, the idiots, despots of dumbbells, the idiots, obviously we're there to protect merchant marine vessels from Iran. Who's Iran going to protect people from? They're the bad ones. Nobody else is going over there pirating boats but them. What are we, that stupid? You see, they're stupid to think people are that stupid. The bad news is there's a lot of people that are that dumb. How many people, if you stopped them in the street and you asked them, well, you said, well, you just want a vacation to the Indian Ocean and it includes your airfare to Indiana. How many people would believe that the Indian Ocean's in Indiana? I think it would be scary how many people in America would believe that. Really. It would be scary. There was a guy that went and he went on a beach somewhere in Florida where somebody was asking people, what would you like, an ounce of gold? Or he gave him this great big chocolate bar. And they took the chocolate bar. I saw it was on YouTube. Let's look at the live stream here. So the American military is full of people that are joining the military not for a good military The reasons they're joining are not the good reasons in terms of what's good for the military. That's a difficulty that they have, and I don't know how they're going to get around that. Hang on a second. I think a lot of these kids in the military, these young people, are going to cave in and they're not going to want to fight. And the officers are gung ho and they're going to try to encourage them, and I don't know how well they're going to do. It's a scary thing when, stuff starts happening and people are getting killed and things like that. It's not lightweight. It's major league serious. I don't know how they'll take it. You had a lot of Russian soldiers surrendering to Ukraine, but I think it still goes on. Many, they just surrendered. You could see that happening in the military. They don't want to get killed and wounded, they just surrender. So I don't know what's going to happen if this American military gets into a real fight with a real army. Now, Hezbollah is not a real army. Okay? They don't have what it takes to be a real army. They're a large terrorist group that has tremendous sway and control over the government. So their claim to fame here, or the way they're going to proceed, is they're going to try to come into Israel on motorcycles and other things and kill Israeli citizens and things of this nature. That's not anything that the Israeli military is really worried about. Okay? What they would do is try to launch their rockets and missiles at various cities near the border, like Kiryat Shmona. Another one I think is Metula. And then also try to hit. They might try to hit Nahariya, and then they would try to hit Haifa and Tel Aviv. Jerusalem is usually not a target of choice because they could hit mosque minarets and Dome of the Rock. And if they blew up the Dome of the Rock, I don't know what the other Arab states would do or say about it. It's never happened, but I don't think they would be happy. I think they'd be peeved, but I don't know if they would attack them. So we are telling the people, though, the military is telling the people of Israel, in the first day they'll knock Lebanon back into medieval times, and I think they mean it. Now, why would Netanyahu? Now, I don't see Hezbollah attacking us. Why would Netanyahu want to do this? Because he's got his criminal cases, and there's a lot of resistance now to the judicial reform moving forward. In addition, it looks like the Supreme Court is going to rule next month against that law that the Knesset passed, which says that you can't. The Knesset passed the law for Netanyahu that says you can't remove the prime minister unless it's for health reasons, and then you need 75% of the Knesset to vote for that. So if the guy is crazy or he's sick, he has a stroke, he gets shot in the head, well, yeah, you can take him out of office that way. but they took the power away from the court or the attorney general ever do that. So the Supreme Court is, by their own words, is most likely going to take that law and set it aside. That's step one. That has to happen first. Then step two might be the reasonableness clause, where the Knesset said that the Supreme Court cannot say an action, not a law, an action of the government, of the Knesset, is not reasonable, therefore it must cease and desist, or it can't happen anymore, it's a stop. Now, I don't know where on the agenda that is, but there's people petitioning the court to remove that. That's a funny one, because the Supreme Court has done that without any legal precedent for many years, like 40 years or so. So they may not attack that, because they don't have a great legal precedent to attack it, but they don't really have to attack it either. Okay? So, because they got other grounds they can work on. So, after they take away the law that says you need a 75%, vote from the Knesset, and it can only be for health reasons. See, that's not reasonable, but it's also, they're going to strike it down, because what if the prime minister has started raping his staff members or her staff members? What if the prime minister is taking corruption money and gets caught? What if the prime minister is selling state secrets to foreign powers? There's many things. You see what I'm saying? So that is likely going to go away, and then they're going to say, look, Netanyahu made a written deal with the government not to modify or mess around with the judiciary, because he has 3 active criminal cases in process now. And Netanyahu is obviously meddling with the judiciary. So they'll tell Netanyahu he has to be removed from office. So the issues we have here is, number one, the Supreme Court will strike down the law about removing a prime minister from office first. They need that out of the way so they could then remove him. Got it? Okay. So they do that, and then Netanyahu and the Knesset say, no, that's not, you have no power to do that. You don't run the government, we do. We're the elected officials. You're appointed officials or whatever, and then the fight starts. And that could be a full civil war, like what you see in Nigeria, which, by the way, should explode into war. Some of the neighboring African countries are more than likely going to go in and try to reinstate that president. And the military is dug in for a fight. They're the ones that removed the president. And I think they put a warrant out for Macron to arrest him, something like that. Which I don't think Macron's going to worry very much about, but it's going to irritate him. So Macron may send something like the French Foreign Legion down there and things of this nature. America said that any aid to Niger is suspended, but if they reinstate the president, they'll resume the aid. Now, the big mystery that Americans don't understand, that they should understand, is why is America giving foreign aid all over the place and not helping the homeless and the unemployed people in America. This is not what the government is supposed to do. When you had the government in America, let's say back in, you know, before World War II or post World War II, they weren't running around doing aid like they do today. You know, why? Because they had a hard currency. They had a gold-backed currency, and then after gold-backed, they had silver-backed. So they weren't just making monopoly money, you know, just printing money and saying, here's a plane load of money, here's a boatload of money, here's $1 billion, here's $5 billion. You know, they weren't able to do that because they were backing it with silver and gold reserves. But when the silver reserves went away in '73 and the dollar was floated, well, then they were able to do it. Let's see what the dollar's doing today. The dollar is down, depending on the country you're going to compare it to. It's down a little bit, but they're trying like heck to keep the Israeli currency high. I'm not entirely sure what their game is. It's 3.69, which is basically 3.7. The dollar buys 3.7 shekels. Okay, so it's more comfortable for me when it's 3.9 or 4. But okay, the euro is, wow, $1.10. That's, you know, that's where it's been around. The dollar's not strong against the euro, but you know, we have seen the euro come down to about par with the dollar in recent years, and that is interesting. Now the British pound is down. The dollar is stronger against that. $1.27. It was higher. So the dollar's stronger against the pound. So in spite of all that stuff in the news with BRICS, the dollar's doing pretty okay. The Canadian dollar only buys 74 cents now. It was 75. So it's actually slightly dropped. But the dollar's not really dropping very much now against Canadian. Yeah, a long time ago, relatively speaking, 9 months, a year and a half or something, it was, Canadian was about 65 cents, but it's been up like this before we had all that hoopla about BRICS. Okay, so let's look at the Aussie dollar. I'm not going to compare with every currency. We'll be here all day. The Aussie is 65. That's pretty static. So is the dollar really dropping in any big way? No, I don't see it. I don't see it. No. I don't see the shekel dropping in any big way. They told us it would from judicial reform, and I'm not seeing it. Sorry. Where is it? It's not there. It's not there. So I need to come back in a second, and then we'll talk about what happens if there's a war with Lebanon, which there probably will be. major methodology of fighting that Lebanon is going to deploy is their missiles and rockets. Most of their missile and rocket inventory, which could go to 150,000, is Katyushas and not sophisticated weapons. Now, we believe that they do have a certain amount of sophisticated weapons that could hit Tel Aviv and Haifa. So the idea is not to wait and let them start the war, and drop 50 or 60 missiles into Haifa and Tel Aviv and start destroying buildings and killing people and things like that. That's not the plan. That's a stupid plan. So Israel is saying, let's do a preemptive strike, which means attack them first. Because if we attack them first, they're not ready, and we'll minimize the amount of damage that they could possibly do. And it'd be a mighty effort that would go for perhaps a day, and then it would be pretty much over. But, you know, what it would look like is probably 100 Israeli jets flying constant sorties, probably in groups of 25. Possibly 150. So you might have as many as probably about 100. And they would be flying and dropping their missiles, well, their bombs, missiles, whatever ordnance they're going to deliver, and then go back to whatever base they were flying out of and refuel and rearm. So it would be round the clock. These groups of, say, 25 would be going and coming all the time, and it would drive the Hezbollah absolutely nuts. They wouldn't know what to do. Okay? In addition, our tanks and our mobile artillery would be on the border, which they're there now, unloading artillery barrages nonstop on targets of where the weapons are in Lebanon. Now, what's Lebanon going to fight back with? Do they have artillery? Yeah. Is it going to be very effective? Absolutely not. Are they going to try to hit our guys with Katyushas and stuff like that? Yeah, they'll try. Are they going to try to invade Israel by pushing through the border and coming in with motorcycles, vehicles, whatever, and killing civilians, which is... See, Israel doesn't go there and kill civilians. Let's go kill civilians. No. Hezbollah will make a concerted effort specifically to kill civilians. We don't do that. Should we? Probably, because if you did that, you'd get rid of the Hezbollah. People wouldn't put up with them. So, you know, the people are responsible. They're hosting these morons, Hezbollah, that are killing us. But that's another conversation. So, that's not likely. Israel is highly unlikely to say, let's start killing civilians. Now, if they manage to get 10 or 12 rockets into Haifa and Tel Aviv and started blowing up apartment houses and office buildings, the gloves would come off. there would be massive destruction in Lebanon. Massive, okay? Massive. Which is likely the case anyway, but it would be worse. So what would we do? We would bomb an artillery attack any and all locations that we were aware of that had capability of missile or missile storage that were anywhere near Israel. Now, well into Lebanon, like, 60 miles or something like that, beyond the range of their missiles, I would say, they probably do have storage of missiles and weapons and things of that nature. We would eventually get to that. We'd probably have to push in 25 miles minimally, to stop the attacks. And with the more modern missiles, it may actually mean 40. It may be 40 miles. And we may create a buffer zone where we occupy temporarily, which is what we did in 2006. We may do that again. And we might not. Hezbollah breaking the fence, using explosives to get through the fence and coming on motorbikes. It looks great on the TV, but what are they going to do? The tanks will mow them down with their machine guns. The aircraft will mow them down. Artillery will mow them down. And the soldiers, the infantry will mow them down. What are they going to do? The idea is one guy on the back of the motorcycle shoots the assault weapon and the other guy drives. Because you can't drive the bike and shoot. And how damaging is that going to be? Not very. They'll get mowed down. That's just the PR thing. It's not a practical threat. Do they have tanks they could deploy against this Hezbollah? No. Lebanon has some tanks, but not very much of anything. And I'm not so sure the regular Lebanese army is going to have any intentions of wanting to get in this fight, because there might not be a Lebanese army left if they do. And if they stay out of it, and Hezbollah's in this fight, there's not going to be much left of Hezbollah. And then they could get rid of Hezbollah as a threat to their power base. So I don't think they're going to join in. Some action like this, till it's all said and done, is probably going to be 3 or 4 weeks. But it'll be probably pretty intense the first week. Will God launch the 2 witnesses over this? By itself, no. No. I mean, it's happened before in the past and he hasn't done it. So just this event alone, I'm not so sure he would. Why? I don't know. If they have a lot of really good long-range weapons, and they're really pelting Israel, then maybe something like that would happen. I don't know. If Israel starts a preemptive attack on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon, how does it end? How do we end this fight? Well, Hezbollah could try for a ceasefire. But that's not going to be anything we're going to go after, because it's just going to leave them around to play again another day. So once it starts, I think we'll want to see the thing through, where they're demilitarized. In other words, their weapon storage, their weapons, their facilities, their buildings, their offices, and all that stuff are all destroyed. Their tunnels, their underground facilities. There's nothing left. Then we're safe. Can Hezbollah invade Israel? No. Is it likely that there'll be forces in Syria that join in? No. Most unlikely. Would Gaza join in? 50-50. That wouldn't make much difference. If Gaza gets in, it won't make much difference. They'll be shut down. Would Netanyahu try to start these wars in a way that we're going to lose, so the country's destroyed and he doesn't go to jail? The military won't let him do that, because though everybody here will be getting killed. Sorry for the interruptions. The military would no, they wouldn't let it happen. And when might this happen with Lebanon? Well, it could happen today, tomorrow, soon. The tanks are on the border. There's a possible that Hezbollah stands down, but right now Hezbollah is on full alert, and they got the soldiers stationed on the border, and I don't see any standing down coming up in the near future, but I don't know. Oh, they're cleaning the chat out again. Hold on, let me irritate them and put stuff back up on the chat. Somebody comes around here with a bot, I think, and deletes the chat messages because they don't like that I talk about the Bible. I do not think it's YouTube. This is just chintzy 2-bit trick, and I seriously doubt it's coming from YouTube. There's people that make software that do stuff to harass people on YouTube, and that's probably what this is. It's a minor harassment. Probably designed to get me to shut the chat, which I'm not going to do. Okay. This could happen anytime now. Now the Niger situation with Nigeria, next to Nigeria, Niger, another country, that seems to be well on its way. And I think today, tomorrow, something like that, we're going to have a war there. I think this thing's headed to war. Is this working right here? Well, I don't know. Hold on. Now it's falling cold. Let me see what's in. It wasn't working right. It's not right. Yeah, I think I got it going. I don't know. It wasn't. Mali is about, Mali is another country. It's about to go into full-scale chaos. Now, a lot of, I used to comment a few months ago, we're not seeing anything blowing up in Africa and South and Central America and the Caribbean, but now we're starting to see Africa all over the place going crazy. So that just is interesting because the Zechariah 12 battle, the next battle in the Bible about Israel, concerning Israel, is Zechariah 12, and the nations that are on the left hand and the right hand, the greater Israel countries, from the land covenant in Genesis 15, get burned up by the two witnesses on the right hand and the left hand. Laying siege means they encircle or encamp around Israel and Jerusalem and Judah, which is the land we have now. But they don't actually invade, they surround us. So I'm looking for Egypt to turn against Israel adamantly, and Jordan. Those are two big missing pieces right now. The Fifth Fleet in the Persian Gulf, what are the implications of that in terms of having big effects? Not much. Can Iran take out some of these Fifth Fleet ships by a swarm attack with naval and air drones and go-fast boats? Yeah. But there'd be a horrific price to pay. America would start blowing up. If they did that, America would start blowing up all their facilities on shore. Sinking American naval vessels in the Persian Gulf just because they're trying to tell you what to do isn't going to sit well with the United States. The United States is not going to just let them walk away from that, okay? Shooting missiles and rockets and artillery at a base with, 60 soldiers, that's all right. Go sink a destroyer or a missile cruiser and see what they do. They're not going to be very polite about it. There'll be a bad price to pay for Iran. See, these go-fast boats have to be based in some locations where they come in for fuel and maintenance and storage. That'll get attacked. Okay? The drones, they're being made in factory or factories, that'll get attacked. They're being stored someplace or someplaces, and that'll be attacked. Look, America will just take F-35s, F-22s, B-1s, B-2s, write up a target package send a bunch of jets over there to hit the target package, and they'll hit it, and they'll fly away, and nothing will happen to them. And Japan's drone program and Go Fast program will go back into the dark ages. Now, they might take a different approach. Iran has a few warships, destroyers, cruisers, that type. I don't know what they call them. They can attack those. But you sink an American destroyer or a cruiser in the Persian Gulf, rest assured there's going to be retribution. What will Iran do after the retribution? Nothing. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Get in their Go Fast boats and try to cross the Atlantic Ocean and attack America? They drown in the ocean. They never make it. They got nothing. Okay? Nothing. They can't do anything. What are they going to do? Find a platoon or two platoons of American soldiers somewhere in Iraq or Syria and attack them? You think America really cares about that? They care, but not by a lot. They're not very careful, mindful of things like that. They'd rather it doesn't happen, but they're not that worried about it. Because nothing changes for America. You knock out 50 or 100 soldiers in the Middle East someplace, how does America's life change? It doesn't. The families of these people are busted up, and they're, but the elite don't care. And they're the ones that are in the Pentagon, running it. And the White House. So they're not going to be very worried or concerned about any of this. Why? How did it hurt them? It didn't hurt them. So what happens if Syria gets into the fight against Israel from inside Syria with the help of the IRGC Iranians, and Hezbollah is also in Syria, and Gaza gets in and Lebanon gets in? Well, Netanyahu's a failure as a human being. He's a failure in life. He's a liar, a cheater, a deceiving expire, and they propelled him into the offices he held because he's a puppet for them. But as you know, he's not operating the way he used to, let's say. So he's a failure, and he leading the country of Israel in a large war is a sad thing for Israel because he's an idiot, and he's two sheets to the wind. He's 75% crazy. He gets much crazier from tossed salad and stuff. He's not going to be able to function. In other words, he'll start showing up without his shirt on or without his tie, or wear mismatched clothes, or start eating a sandwich at the wrong time, and come to work drunk and stuff like that. He's real close to that. In my opinion. So it's a very, very bad thing to have him there with this. And it's a very bad thing to have him around when he has a conflict of interest with Israel. How can he be supportive of the country of Israel when the country of Israel wants to put him in jail for 16 years? How can he do this? They're idiots. They got to get him out of office. They'd be better off just kissing him on the cheek and saying, we don't care if you break all the laws. It's okay. We don't care. Oh, now we got something interesting. Now we're getting somebody coming around and deleting what I write as I'm putting it in. Aha. Well, let me do a little spiritual warfare. Pray, you do spiritual warfare, but ask the Lord to punish them as severely as he possibly would or could for doing this. The fact that they don't believe doesn't mean anything. Okay? That means nothing. These are normally just people that haven't developed emotionally in life, and they do things like this, internet tough guys. Keep petitioning the Lord to punish severely these people that are coming around for 2 or 3 weeks now, deleting our chat. Okay, they obviously are an enemy of Jehovah, they're an enemy of ours, and just keep petitioning the Lord repeatedly to punish them harshly, so they are unable to do this again. Okay, harsh punishment. Like he tells us in the Bible, the widow keeps going to the judge asking for justice and this and that. Do it. Just keep petitioning him, and he'll stop them in a bad way for them, and we'll be rid of them. Okay? It'll happen. Just keep believing and praying. Don't always believe, he's not going to do anything. He may not do it the way you want, but it may be. I had somebody years ago mocking me, for being a believer and an Israelite, and hated Israel and the Jews, and their house burned down, and somebody in the family got killed. I think the son or something like that. Don't be so sure nothing's going to happen, guys. Just keep petitioning the Lord. Okay. Now, in September, they may knock down this law that they can't remove Netanyahu from office unless it's concerning health. And then, after the Supreme Court strikes that law down, then they might knock Netanyahu out of office, say he has to leave, there's a conflict of interest, and he has to go. And he may be trying to stop that and do things before that happens. So he may provoke a war for us. So he may do a preemptive attack in Lebanon. He just hit Damascus a day or two ago, but that's always going on. Lost my place. Got back. German shipbuilder NVL Group used to be called Lursen Defense. Lursen's the super yacht builder, maybe the best one in the world, and they make military boats too. Interesting. Well, I guess, why not? They probably don't put the weapon systems in the boat or the radar and stuff like that. They probably just build the boat itself, and they put the air conditioning, the water, the hydraulics, and the doors and all that stuff in. There's been the USSS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the USSS George H.W. Bush and the USS George Washington. I believe their aircraft carriers have been deployed, dated today, in Norfolk, Virginia. We'll need to get more details about what's going on, but that sounds interesting. interesting. Something's up with that. Um, okay. I'm looking at the military equipment that's headed up to Lebanon, and I'm seeing mostly tanks. Here's one picture. So I think it's predominantly tanks that we're putting up to Lebanon. In Burkina Faso, 26 people were killed in an attack by some Islamic radical group. The Chinese Coast Guard is harassing the Philippine vessels. No surprise. Russia's moving a massive amounts of tanks to the eastern front in Ukraine. And there's a picture of it. I don't know what they're up to. Well, obviously they're going to hit Ukraine. I mean, were they trying to stop Ukraine from advancing to them? I'm not sure yet. We'll find out. Modi of India is facing a no-confidence vote over being silent on ethnic violence tearing at remote Manipur. Well, they might get rid of Modi. I don't think that's any great loss, but we had an emergency prayer for somebody that was facing tornadoes in the area, and all went well, by the way. So it would sort of be a praise report. Here, I think I showed you this. Is a picture of an Israeli armed with an M16, a settler. And he's one of the few Israelis that understand hats. This guy understands hats. Joke, but true. I was just going to do something. What was I going to do? I lost my train of thought. Okay. India might change by a lot if Modi is gone. It could change. I don't know for the better or the worse. Modi is pro-Hindu. He's not very happy with the other religions. There's not that many Christians in India, but they're there. They're probably in the millions, but very small. And the Hindus are quite substantial, and so are the Muslims. So thousands of Israeli doctors are threatening to quit if Netanyahu won't adhere to court rulings. So they're saying if Netanyahu quits listening to the court, they're going to quit. Well, the reason they're doing it is not that Netanyahu's really going to care that the doctors quit. His doctor is probably not quitting, okay? What he cares about, well, what's going to bother Netanyahu is that people are going to realize they got to do something to get rid of him. He ain't going away on his own. Somebody's going to have to throw him out of office. That I can tell you. And he's going to not want to go. And maybe he told Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz he's going to arrest them if they try to do a vote of no confidence or something. Can he do that? Legally, no, but I mean, the guy's cracked. He's a crackpot at this point. He's lying all the time. He's lying. He's telling mixed stories. He's telling Biden's administration one thing, the Israeli government is something else. When the prime minister gets desperate to that point where he's telling conflicting stories to people that should be more important to him, that he shouldn't flippantly lie to, the guy's cracked. I think that's my opinion. I don't think the person's right anymore. I think the person's in Gaga Google land. You know, Gaga Google land is where Barbie came from. In that new movie, I saw the coming attraction trailer on YouTube. She's up in some paradise type place, and then she goes down to Earth. What is she? The freaking Messiah of Doll Land or something like that, you know? Barbie comes to Earth. I mean, it is so stupid. But the American people like that. I'm telling you, tell them the Indian Ocean's in Indiana and see if they believe you. They don't even know where Indiana is. Some people do, but many people may not, right? Hamas is sentencing people to death in Gaza for collaborating with Israel. I'm sure the Gaza people are really in love with this. Why did they do it? Because the Gaza people are protesting against Hamas. So they're telling them, we're going to kill you. Look what we're doing now. They're getting them scared. Ethiopia is lighting up. They're having clashes that are heating up. So there's trouble in Ethiopia now. See, it's getting pretty pronounced. It's end times. I think we're coming to Zechariah 12, and the nations are being distracted. So when the two witnesses start operating openly, they're going to be too involved, the nations, with their own stuff to do anything about anything. When I say their own stuff, their own problems, difficulties, and challenges, that sounds very professional. An article, an interview on, well, this is too much. I got to read this. Hold on. Netanyahu is an Iranian spy, Israeli lawyer to N12. Lawyer Ofer Bartel who was once a candidate for the High Court of Justice, and the state prosecution accused Netanyahu of being an Iranian spy, causing an outrage on N12 Monday night, which was last night. Do I think Netanyahu is an Iranian spy? No. No, I don't buy this. It's an interesting story, and he got a lot of attention to himself, but Netanyahu, an Iranian spy, just, no, I don't buy that at all. No. Rabbi Thau calls on followers of his to wage war on Israel's LGBTQ community. Well, that's going to go over big for him, huh? How to make friends and win people, winning friends, make and influence people, whatever the expression is. He's just going to influence more people to be the enemies of the Haredim. Let's see what the chat, the live stream's looking like now. Let me open and close it and see what's going on. I gotta go to, okay, I'll get it open now. And they didn't delete anything again. We have 3 million Iranian males came in on DACA, all fighting AIDS. We also have Taliban and Palestinian here. What do you think? Well, who are you talking about on DACA? Okay, let me look up the word DACA. I'm not sure you're talking about America. DACA means deferred action for childhood arrivals. Oh, to protect eligible young adults who brought the U.S. children. Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay, so then you mean America. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know the children what to tell you. I know the Iranian people that came in 1979, 80 era or before are not good Americans. They're not nice for America, but they're not going to turn against America either. They just came here to make money, and all these people care about is their own families. They don't care about anybody else. They throw you in the garbage. They're not a charitable people. They're not nice people. They're a lot of despots. horrible people to live with. The ones that I came across with in America years ago were horrible people to live with. That I can tell you. I never came across any really good, nice ones that were benevolent people. They just came to America to make money and selfishly hoard and stuff like that. But anyway, so they came over in their fighting age. What would happen? Well, I think there's a lot of people in America coming through the border that are enemies of America. Okay? Chinese and others, Muslims. There's been for 30, 40 years or more talk of Muslim military training camps in America. People have made maps of them, videos, going there, looking at them. Are they real or not? I don't know. If the people know about them and the media know about them, the FBI and Homeland Security for sure know about them, but that doesn't mean they're not there. They can be there, yeah. I mean, could it be a threat? I think so. I think you'll have a lot of enemies from within. I think the open border gave them an open door to come in. And I do believe you'll have trouble with them. Undoubtedly. Well, Obama cracked one day, I remembered well, he said there's 100,000 Chinese spies in America. They come in as students and work visa and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of it in America. But, it's another matter to go take a military base over, But, yeah, I think America in Jeremiah 50:51 is going to be attacked. And it says there'll be ruler fighting ruler, which will be first. And they tried to heal her, but she will not heal, then they leave. So I think that's the ruler fighting ruler. There's a lot of division in America. There's an unbelievable amount of guns. They say people buy guns at the rate of $1 million a month now, $1 million a month. There's such a massive amount of guns and ammunition and sophisticated sniper guns and stuff like that. Yeah, they never checked into their college, they never stayed in their college, and they don't get deported, and they get lost, and there's a real problem with that open door. If the aliens themselves could come in illegally, how many of them would just take a little 6 or 8 pound package of cocaine or heroin or something in their backpack, and when they get in, they get a commission for that. They might get paid $5,000 or $10,000 for smuggling that in, and then they're riding high, Leaving the door open with the border is very bad, and there's got to be a price for it, It's one thing to want cheap labor, but it's another thing to leave the door open and the back door open. So, what you're going to see is America having its wars internally, then from foreign countries, and the nations are going to be fighting when Israel makes its move, and then you'll have the second Exodus. I've been doing this, teaching this for years. So please pray for me and my wife, Rivka. Pray for us. Yeah.
I need to go out. Your eggs are in the oven.
Thank you.
Mango in the fridge.
Okay, thank you. Pray for our peace, safety, protection, joy, and peace, and pray for our animals and pets to be happy, healthy, and whole, and not run away and jump the fence. We're having crazy things now. Dogs are jumping out of the fence and then jumping back in the yard. They're nuts. It's driving us crazy. Help, pray for us. Pray for our finances. We really need that. And pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and pray for better videos. And I'm out. Thank you.